Hey everybody, Frank Vespi here, joined by Mackenzie Pfeiffer. You've seen Mackenzie on the simulcast from Laurel Park, Timonium, Pimlico. Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi, Frank. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us here. And of course, John Piazzik. John handicaps Laurel and Pimlico and Timonium every day of live racing on the racingbiz.com. John, what's shaking?
Great to be here, Frank. It's like my Breeders' Cup week in a lot of ways. It's all the weeks of handicapping over and over again. And this is the week I have circled on my calendar every year. So it's great card as always, and I can't wait to dive in.
All right, sounds good. Why don't we do that? Maryland Million Classic, mile and an eighth, easy for me to say. $150,000. It is 3-year-olds and up that are Maryland sired horses. So let's talk about that for 1 second before we go any farther. We have 11 in the main body, 2 that are also eligible. Also eligibles, John, they're probably not going to draw in, barring carnage that would take
That's
4
right.
horses out. Explain
Yeah.
this.
Yep. We'll have to have quite a few scratches on the main body because, out of town folks always like, oh, how come there's not that many? There's like also eligibles, even though it's not a full field. The reason why is because horses on the AE list are Maryland bred. However, they're not Maryland sired. And this day is designed to spotlight Maryland sired horses, not just Maryland breds, because Maryland sired horses tend to spotlight the local breeding industry a lot more than those who are just from out of town stallions. As such, both Good Afternoon Oscar and Accelerator will need a host of scratches. Not impossible, as we saw last year with Intrepid Daydream and the Distaff, but I wouldn't spend too much time gauging those two chances.
They will need 4 horses to scratch for one of them to draw in and 5 for both. So it'd be a lot of scratches, but yeah, stranger things have happened, as John says. Number 1 here in our 11 horse field, well, 13, but -2, as John just explained, is Little Lance for Billy Campbell, 30-1 on the morning line. JD Acosta is going to ride. This one is 2 for 2 around 2 turns. John, any love for this one?
He has shown some promise this year. He was originally campaigned by his breeder, Jamie Ness. Billy Campbell claimed him back in May, and he has done good work with him. He turned in a nice first level allowance win 3 starts back. However, he has taken a step backwards in his last 2. He was both beaten by Hit the Road Jack at Timonium 2 starts ago. Then last time out, he was totally flat. He chased the pace against the field, not unlike the one he'll see today. Ended up being well beaten. It's possible that he improves going back out to 2 turns, but he still have to improve by a few points off his best race to win this one. I think he's up against it.
What are your thoughts, Mac?
I do agree with you. I think he's up against it. I couldn't quite understand the option to cut back in distance because I thought those 2 mile and a 16th efforts that we saw at Laurel were actually quite good. So I don't want to take too much away from him. That open allowance and then, stepping into state bred and restricted company didn't quite go his way, but going the 7/8 I kind of excused because I know he was sprinting early on. Maybe that's why they felt inclined to take a try again, but he's just shown a bit more as he had a bit more ground added.
The 2 horse is Crossland for Kerry Holbein, Angel Cruise up. This one's 12-1 on the morning line. Got put up by disqualification in an allowance last time out, Mac.
Yes, and that was an off the turf event going the mile and an eighth. For me, I actually really think that Angel might fit this horse quite well if he's given kind of a forward ride, is placed in the action or just within reach of it. That's sort of where he's going to find a little bit of success. I kind of play with this one underneath. I'll see how prices are when we get down to post time because he's one who see how he looks on the day, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of a stir there.
Well, and it is a wide open field, so you can kind of go hunting a little bit of a price and still have some live horses here. John, what do you think about Crossland?
He's the exact kind of horse who goes off at like 21-1 or so, comes in fourth, and you're like, oh man, he messed up. Mr. Perfecta, how did I not include him? I mean, he has great late pace figures. He often finds himself behind slow early tempos, as he did last time when he didn't cross the wire first, and sometimes leaves himself with too much to do. That being said, there is a decent amount of pace in here. if he gets a fast enough early tempo, he could make a serious late impact. I don't think that he can be disregarded out of hand. And a fun fact, his breeders, Lenny and Pat Pino, they also bred millionaire Jackson Traveler, and they're searching for their first Maryland Million win with this guy.
That is a fun fact. All right, the 3-horse. Now, the top pair from last year are back in here. The winner by disqualification was Ain't the Beer Cold. The horse that was first past the post but disqualified is the 3-horse. That's Market Maven. Let's take a look at that video from last year's Maryland Million Classic. John, this one's got a new trainer, Jacinto Solis. It was Jamie Ness a year ago, but has maintained form.
He's been doing very well at his base of parks. In his 2 dirt starts earlier this year, he came in third in both of them, both against better horses than he'll see here, both times with very solid speed figures. On the Brisnet scale, he ran in the mid-90s both times. That's the kind of race that wins this kind of race. Now, granted, though Park's form doesn't always translate over to Laurel, but obviously he has proven himself on this track. He crossed the wire first here last year, has won some decent races on the surface, including a solid 4th against Open Company in the Richard Small Stakes back on Thanksgiving weekend last year. He'll also be somebody who is going to benefit from a solid early pace. I don't think he can be disregarded at all, and I'm hoping that he slides through the cracks in the wagering just a little bit. You know, being an out-of-town horse, not having quite as flashy form as he did going into this race last year, he could be a little bit interesting.
You use him underneath in second. Mackenzie, you're not using Market Maven at all.
I have to admit, originally this was a no-brainer for me. I did, but only being able to select so many horses, I ultimately end up kind of saying if there's a scratch, then he's the next one in line for me. Comes in this year, same setup as last year, even though with a different trainer, went to the Stormcat and then the Alphabet Soup. We saw that work for him last year. Curious if that'll go again this year. I think he's really going to depend on the trip, and he very well might get it here. It's one who you can't really write off, especially with the class that they saw from this one. As a young horse, was a contender in the Wood Memorial. I think it's always been there. It's just a little bit of a matter of the day and some racing luck.
All right, the 4 horses, Mosler time, 5-1 on the morning line for trainer Cal Lynch. Leading rider Jamie Rodriguez going to be up. Super impressive last time out. Let's take a look at that last race at Laurel, September 7th. Mackenzie, this is your top selection.
Yes, I use this one as my top selection. I like Jamie Rodriguez getting back on board. The only 3 efforts that I didn't really like, I had pretty valid excuses for. And so to me, that's a consistent horse. This one I thought last out drifted 3 wide into the first turn, but just had this incredibly efficient stride and really was able to just kind of get back into things. And, past the leader in the far turn, I didn't feel like he was being ridden very hard. Again, just that efficiency in traveling, and then drew off into the stretch. So I like that this one has a nice stalking opportunity here, a little bit of tactical speed. I think the extra ground is just going to be fine for him.
Your top choice too, John.
He's my top pick, and the more I think about him, the more and more excited I get. He is by Country Life Farms Mosler, as a name would suggest. Josh and Mike, if you're out there.
What's your clue?
Josh and Mike, if you're out there, hi and good luck. He's fairly lightly raced. It's only his 10th career start, and as Mackenzie noted, he's had a series of kind of bizarre circumstances that have prevented him from steadily showing his best stuff. He tossed a jockey at the start in one race. He had a bad effort when he had a bad break on a wet track. Didn't do too much. He tried grass. That wasn't for him. He tried to run with band camp, going 7 furlongs, 2 starts back. That's a very hard thing to do. He ended up well being. However, when he gets his trip, going 2 turns just off the pace, he thrives. As we saw, he ran huge last time out. Ran a career top figure on the Brisnet scale of 95, ran a 91 against Maryland restricted allowance foes at Pimlico back in May under similar circumstances, won gate to wire going a mile on this track back in March against Softer. He's been getting better every time he's allowed to show his best stuff. You know, obviously Jamie, a top jockey here, and Jamie, we trust. I have to figure he'll get a nice trip just off the leaders, and if he's allowed to run at the top of the stretch, as long as he has racing room, he'll kick away from leads and get the job done.
Trainer Phil Capuano's got a couple in here. One of them is the 5 horse, Delice Vita, who's 6-1 on the morning line. Second time off the bench. Forrest Boyce going to be in the irons. This one's got to get back to his better form, John.
Phil Capuano, of course, the nephew of Maryland Million's all-time leading trainer, Dale Capuano. Dale won 15 Maryland Million races in his career. Phil is still searching for his first. He'll have 2 chances here. This, I think, is definitely the other Phil Capuano in here, as in the not as highly regarded one. He loves getting checks. He just hates winning. In 5 starts this year, he's hit the board 4 times, has not won. He was very flat last time out, going 7 furlongs. That being said, it was his first start off a 6-month layoff. He was in pretty solid form against fairly similar types to what he'll see here. Over the winter, had a string of 2nd and 3rd place finishes, had some good speed figures. It just seems like he always gets his trip and then can't quite finish. Like, he doesn't really have that punch needed to actually win. So I think he'll be involved late, but he'll cause his backers a lot of heartbreak because they'll think he'll be in the mix at a price at the top of the stretch, and then he'll just stop.
Is that how you see it, Mac?
I think you said it perfectly, where, this is one who just doesn't quite have that finishing kick. And I think my take was, I wonder if they just go on with this one, but I don't think this is the spot where he's going to have that opportunity. And so where does that leave us? Well, about mid-pack. I like this one, and I think regardless of what company this one's been in, he's been successful and competitive, but he just isn't the one who I put at the top of my ticket.
Let's take a look at the last race for the 6 horse here. That was at Timonium and excuse me, in August. And this was a super impressive effort. This is Hit the Road Jack, 15-1 on the morning line here for Rudy Sanchez, Solomon Taisley, Pastina going to ride. And, we were talking before, Mackenzie, this one's going to be on my ticket. This one is the speed of the speed in here.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of upset some of the ones that I had in mind. I don't know if I should say upset, but it definitely will put a challenge to some of the ones who I'm using. Adding ground, I'm just a little bit curious if this one does have a bit of pressure. How's he going to take to it? And is he really going to like that, especially adding a bit of a distance?
Kobe's back. His sire was a closing sprinter, has actually done pretty well with horses going route of ground. So that gives me hope. The 3 turns of Timonium everything gives me hope here, but 15-1 gives me a lot of hope, John.
Absolutely. And as you said, this one by Kobe's back, who stands at Bonita Farm, owned by the Boniface family. Bonita Farm, 2nd place on the all-time Maryland Million Breeder list with 10 victories. And this guy could very well give them number 11 at a good price. As you noted, he ran huge last time. He's very lightly raced. He's only made 5 starts, only 2, I should say, since early December. He showed a lot of promise and was moving forward at about this time last year, started off his career with back-to-back wins. However, this is a pretty big class test for him. He's only really faced one field at this distance of this caliber. And even then, Little Lance, who came in 2nd that day, probably one of the long shots here. Good Afternoon Oscar, who came in 3rd. If he draws in, he'll be one of the long shots also. So it's kind of a blank slate. We know he has a lot of raw ability. I just don't know how he'll do in a full field of more mature, more experienced horses. However, if he runs back that last race, he probably wins, or at least comes close. At 15-1 and likely higher at post time, I can't talk you off him.
I'll probably talk myself off him because I'm famous for that, but we'll see. Now, last year's champion Ain't the Beer Cold is a 7 horse, 12-1 morning line. Trainer Kenny Cox, heavy on Toledo, going to be up. And John, this horse is the little girl with the little curl. When he's good, he's very good. And when he's bad, he's kind of horrid. It's coming in off a horrid, but his efforts at times in this race a year ago are really good.
Well, you talked about Hit the Road Jack being the speed of the speed a moment ago. If Ain't the Beer Cold is not the speed of the speed in whatever race he's in, he's really up against it. He won last year's Classic with a fairly easy gate to wire trip. He got the half mile in 48 and 2/5, 3/4, and 113 and 1/5. And from there, he had enough energy to give Market Maven a tussle and cross the wire a nose behind that one. He won the of Dancer Stakes back in mid-April in similar fashion. He got a very easy trip on the lead, had just enough to fend off his rivals and win at 12-1. However, he's been challenged on the front end in his last few starts, and as you noted, he's been well beaten. 3 starts back, he lost to the Deputed Testimony by 16 lengths when he couldn't get to the front. 2 starts back at Timonium, he was well behind early after a bad break and was awful. Last time out, he was run into the ground by Frightland, who basically acted as post-times rabbit in that Polynesian. I'm sure Brittany noted that if Ain't a Beer Cole gets a loose lead, he's trouble, so she sent Frightland after him. Ain't a Beer Cole lost by 40 lengths. That being said, Jevion knows what he's doing. He's obviously one of the top jockeys in Maryland, rode this horse very well last year, so I'm sure he'll do everything in his power to get this horse a loose lead. I just don't know if he can pull it off.
You agree with that assessment, Mackenzie?
I do. It's almost like you took the notes right off of my page. This was one who I thought is either going to grab the early lead or just end up with too much company on the front end and, isn't going to take to it. He keeps very good company. And I think that's why we see him, with this sort of dramatic ebb and flow of his form, because it either works for him on those days or he's up against horses that he can't shake the way that he'd like to. So, he figures I can understand people leaning into him. I just don't buy it that day.
You can understand people leaning in. You're just not one of them.
Exactly.
All right. The 8 horse is your morning line favorite. That's Feeling Woozy from Hammy Smith. Victor Carrasco going to ride. This one has only tried 9 furlongs once. He won and got a 98 buyer speed figure that day. It's a little while since he won a race. And when I talked to Hammy the other day, he said, I'm surprised we're the favorite. What do you think, Mackenzie? You guys both like him a little bit.
I actually was surprised this horse comes in as the favorite. I thought there might be a little bit more value, and I can't say that was part of the reason, but I leaned in that regard. Best figures today, going the mile and an eighth, 3 back, was off the turf, but really just went almost at a sprint and still came on really strong to finish. So I think just held the winner inside a bit long and couldn't match that closing run. For me, I think this is a horse who, even early on, going back to last December, we saw some really good efforts where he was beating out Armando R and the Addison Poor. I think that, going less than a mile isn't where we're going to see this one, but can handle it going anything over.
John, you agree?
I picked him third. I do think it's a bit surprising that he's morning line favorite, but it's one of those races where there is no clear-cut morning line favorite, so might as well be like, you would throw darts at 5 horses and pick one of them. As you said, the son of Northview's Irish War Cry, bred by Sycamore Hall, also owned by the Goldens. He had that big win in early December, but he got a very loose lead on a very speed-favoring track. In fact, that day, it would have been more notable had he not won by 11 lengths and owns a big figure. It was a tailor-made opportunity for him. He hasn't won since. However, he has been getting better since coming off a long layoff in mid-June. He wasn't a great third last time out, but he was wide and facing more pure 6 furlong horses in 7's 11 and Hurricane J. I don't think Feeling Woozy is a pure 6 furlong horse. Thinks he wants to go a little bit further. So it was a pretty credible third. We're going to saw an even better third. 2 starts back behind Irish Exit. Very nice. As it takes quality horse around here, and Brilliant Ice, who we'll talk about in a moment. Consistently, he has some of the best figures in this field. He has a decent late punch. Victor Carrasco gets aboard, always a good sign. I want to believe. I think he has to be respected. And if you do like him, I do think you'll get better than his 9-2 morning line.
Righty. Now the 9 horse, Mugatu, for trainer Jeff Angler. Sheldon Russell going to be up. We'll take a look at this one's effort in the Bald Eagle Derby back in August at Laurel Park. That was an off the turf race. And Mackenzie, this one's a good news, bad news. The good news is he's kept really good company over this year. The bad news is he's lost to really good company a lot.
Well, that's exactly it. I couldn't decide how to go with this one. Getting back to a place like this, I think he fits really well. Has it taken away from him? That was sort of the question I went into with the Bald Eagle Derby, but I saw a lot in the horse in that particular day, and I was really pleased with what we saw in the effort. For me, I think Sheldon getting on board here, we can get a similar type of ride. And he just kind of let the horse put himself into the race was what I really liked. He didn't really hurry him. There was no pressure. He got comfortable and he just ended up chasing the winner and couldn't quite get past. Spotted him a little bit of distance, making the run. And, I don't take that away from the horse. I thought he was really, really good there. And he might be happy to get back to Laurel.
Yeah, I think you're right. He should appreciate a little bit easier company than he has kept. I mean, this is a horse that ran in the Preakness. John, you're not using him. What's your take?
Well, not only was he in the Preakness, he was actually entered in the Derby. He was on the also eligible list. He didn't draw in, even though he would have had about as much chance as the three of us in a horse costume in that race. As you said,
I
he has been
like us
facing,
in that spot.
you know, I mean, you know what? Crazy things have happened, as we said, but not the impossible. As you and Mackenzie talk about, he has been facing much, much better all year long. He lost a batten down of a very nice 3-year-old last time out in the Bowman Fly. I thought that Bald Eagle Derby was also a really big race. I mean, he was badly pace compromised that day. Give It a Whirl, who won that race at very slow early fractions. And really, there's probably almost no 3-year-old alive, even a top level ones, who could have closed in Give It a Whirl from that spot. If you let him go 51 for the half, 115 and 4/5 for 3/4, you're dead. But Mugatu closed very well that day, lost by only 1 3/4 lengths. Didn't run that great a percent figure, and 82, but based on the way that race set up, I think that's easily favorable. It is kind of interesting, though, because as you said, he's been getting so well beaten by so much better horses. I don't quite know where he fits in with this group. And I do kind of wonder if those gaudy company lines plus Sheldon getting the mount is going to cause him to be overbet. I think he's a fair bet at or around his 6-1 morning line. However, it would not shock me if he ended up going off as the favorite.
That would be a first for him because he's been, it wouldn't be a first, but he was 27 to 1 last time. He was over 100 to 1 in the Bluegrass. So he certainly has been ignored by the public at times. The 10 horse is Brilliant Ice, and at Eubanks, Jaron Barbosa going to be in the irons. This one is 6 to 1 on the morning line. He had a easy 2 other than win 3 back, John.
I think he's very live in here. He's by in fact, the king of Maryland Stallions, Great Notion. Mugatu is by Blofeld, I should note, who could well end up being Great Notion's heir apparent in that regard. Back to Brilliant Ice, he's been in career best form ever since a bit of a swoon over the spring. He's won 3 huge races in a row. Made a big race in the lead. He battled with Irish Exit the whole way that day. He got pressured from him as around at the final turn, fought on hard, lost by a nose, owned a big figure of 95. He hasn't raced since that August 11th outing, and he's only worked once in the past month. However, it was a very good workout. He got in 4 furlongs this past Saturday in 48 and 3/5 seconds, a perfect tune-up kind of drill. I'm not quite sure how he'll do going a mile and an eighth. His mile and the 16th races have been good, but not great. And I kind of wonder if he's in here mostly because Annette Eubanks also trains Bandcamp, who's one of the favorites in the sprint, and she might want to keep those two apart. So I'm not quite sure if he's a mile and an eighth horse, a mile or 7 furlongs might be a little more in his wheelhouse. That being said, if he handles that extra half, that extra furlong or so, it'll be tough to beat.
What's your take, Mackenzie?
I kind of agree with you. I go back and forth on the distance. What I kind of tuned into, though, is some of these efforts where he's really game trying to run things down more recently is a little encouraging for what we could see in here as far as the pace setup and kind of not necessarily needing the lead, but being able to kind of stick along with it. If he is trying to run on a bit, maybe it works out that they wanted to just test him at the distance. And if you're avoiding the sprint, where else do you go?
Where else do you go? All right, finally, the 11 horse. It's the other, but not the other. Phil Capuano trainee. That's Vance Scholar, 6-1 on the morning line. Going to have Jorge Ruiz up. This guy, Mackenzie, he won 3 of his first 6 starts, only 1 of his last 19.
Yeah, so I used this one underneath. Early on, I felt was maybe a little bit of a front end type, but has run some of his better figures when coming from off of it. I think if there's a pace set up here today, which is what we keep talking about, there should be. This is one who I think could come running home just based on what we've seen. I think he's in the mix, even if he hasn't won, who's going to come running and who's going to be trying to get a piece of it. I think this is one who could be kind of comfortable. He can handle the outside trip. And so I don't worry so much about that.
John?
I remember I loved this horse in the 2022 Maryland Million Classic. He was in great form that year. He had won the Bald Eagle Derby back in August. He finished second in the Cape Henlopen at Delaware Park off a 2-day layoff. Then came in third in the Japan Turf Cup. He looked very, very live going into the Classic. However, he couldn't quite get the job done that day. Came in second. And ever since then, as you alluded to, it's pretty much been one loss after the other, with his only win coming early in the 2023 season. That being said, all of his figures fit in with these. His only clunker within his last few came in the Fine Stakes 2 starts back, going a mile. Might have been a little bit short for him. I think he's much better suited for a mile and a 16th mile and 8th. I would have liked to have seen a little more punch last time out against a pretty tough allowance optional claimant company back on September 13th. I wonder if he made a bit of a premature move that day and didn't have as much kick as he probably should have in the stretch. I think if Jorge Ruiz does time his move just right, and last time he rode him, he was a very nice second behind Shaft's Bullet, who's much better than anybody in this field, he could be a serious late presence.
All right, so Mackenzie's going 4, 8, 9, 11. John's going 4, 3, 8, 10. Mackenzie, I want to hear your last thoughts, but I also want to know, hey, what's the logo on the shirt that you're wearing? We can't see the logo here.
You're right. You're right. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
the Racing Biz. That's a
Yes.
nice shirt.
I'm partial to blue, so it works out. You have great colors.
We do our best. We aim to please. Last thoughts on the Maryland Million Classic.
Go with the value. I think if there's one that you like and you find a little bit of value in it, I wouldn't hold back here. I think it's kind of a wide open race and you could look at it over and over and come up with 10 different answers. I know I did.
That's right. John, what's your last thoughts?
As Mackenzie said, I don't think you can really go wrong. Whoever you like, you'll get a pretty square price. Mosley Time is the very slight top pick, but I can understand an argument for almost anybody in this contest. It's, once again, a fantastic betting race.
It is a fantastic betting race. All right. They are Mackenzie Pfeiffer and John Piazek. We are the Racing Biz. My name's Frank Vespi. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck at the 39th Maryland Million.